set up. So with that intro, we have I think it's going to be a great talk tonight. Loren Fisher is in the screen here somewhere. I don't see him right now, but Loren, just give a wave. There he is. Wave. Loren's going to be talking to us about light painting objects, small and large. I met up with Loren at one of the several meetups that he organizes, the Philadelphia Travel Photographers and the Somerset Photography Meetup. Those of you who like meetups, I'd recommend that you check those out. They're amazingly active. And I learned a lot in the session that I did, and we communicated thereafter. Loren is a professional photographer, been doing this since 1978. He's photographed the Rockettes, Springsteen, and he's been to the Olympics in Seoul. His CV of places that he's done professionally is pretty extensive. He's written 2 photography books, one on Pope John Paul II, and one, which is pretty interesting, Branson Backstage, where he did 35 live music theater shoots and put that together in a book. Loren does a lot of teaching locally. He does a lot of workshops near and far, and has his work exhibited in some galleries in the New Jersey area. And with that, I'll turn the program over to Loren. Thanks for joining us, Loren. I'm going to ask the guests to be, or the members and guests to be on mute. I'll watch the chat room. You can put your questions in there. And when the time is right, I'll interrupt Loren with your questions, and then we'll come together at the end. So take it away, Loren.
Great, thank you, Vince. It's a pleasure to be here. I love doing these kind of things and love talking about light. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and I probably won't be able to see the chat box, so if you can,
I'll watch that.
Feed that to me, that'd be good. And okay. Uh-oh, I think I went the wrong way. Hang on. I'm gonna have to redo that. I did that one time, nobody mentioned it. Where's my stop share? There it is. Okay, we'll try that again.
All right.
That's top 2, that's what I wanted. No. Okay, now you should be singing light painting, right?
You are. Yep.
Okay, and nothing else in my name. Okay, so I'm Loren Fisher. I appreciate being here. I love light, and photography is all about light. And I can think of nothing more exciting to photograph than a dirty sneaker sitting on a pizza box. And it really comes down to the glamour of photography, and I can't think of anything more glamorous than photographing a sneaker on a pizza box, sitting on a bench, using a raincoat as a backdrop. And that doesn't seem like it can be too cool until you put some light on it. And so when I work the light, then I can take a pretty boring subject and make it look pretty nice. And the key to doing that is how you control the light. And we're going to talk about that a lot more. But I get excited by power tools, but making images of them can look pretty dull until I break out my flashlight. And I'm doing these with little bitty flashlights, and we'll go into details on that here in a bit. But just ordinary objects, even wooden spoons, can become fairly dramatic when you put on the right light. And the key is to use a very small flashlight, and I'll show you my arsenal later. But I'm doing a very long exposure. I'm in the dark. I've covered the windows. So this one, my shutter was open for 29 seconds. I was at f20, and I'm just using a little flashlight and just painting around and coming at different angles and different densities. So any one part of the picture is probably only getting 2 or 3 seconds of light. And so by changing the angles and changing the direction of the light, you get this really unique look, which if you study light and you look at this, it's like, what the hell is that light source? That doesn't make any sense. So even something pretty simple, I'm up in Vermont now, hiding away from the COVID. So you have to photograph maple syrup if you're in Vermont. Pretty boring until you turn out the lights and break out the flashlight. And so just like any painting, you don't throw a big pile of paint on the wall and hope it spreads out nice. You smooth it out slowly. And I like to do it so that there are shadows and highlights. I don't particularly always want to have, or I usually don't want to have a smooth, even light over the whole thing. I like giving it some highlights, coming at, like I said, the different angles and seeing what happens when I come from the back or when I come from the side, or I try light from the top or light from down below. And again, this is a 30-second exposure. I put some flashlight, I'm in pitch black, some flashlight on the backdrop, some light on the subject, and it makes things look pretty cool. And even things that start out pretty can become really special when you put that light on them. This is just the room light on a batch of flowers. And then when I change the light, it gets much better. So for small things like this, I like using a very tight beam of light. So I only accent part of the photo. So for the shots you've seen so far, I use a little tiny pen light that has 1 or 2 AAA batteries. And the light from that is even too broad for me and too bright, so I make a real fancy snout for it. This is very high tech. I use aluminum foil and wrap it around the end of the flashlight to keep that light from spreading too much. Try to make sure I have a little bit of a hole so the light can come through. So this gives me a real focused beam of light. So you can see that spot of light on the shoe. And so, I have larger flashlights that can focus the beam, but when I'm doing something this small, it spreads out too much and it doesn't give me enough control. So most of the time I'm holding the light less than 6 inches away from the subject. And I'm constantly moving it. I'm painting back and forth on whatever I'm photographing. The farther away you get, the more the light spreads out and gives you a different look. So I'm trying all kinds of angles. So one way for me to get that the light there, that my fancy snoot the way I want it is I stick a pen in the light, wrap my foil around it so it keeps a round hole. Then when I pull the pen out, I have a nice snoot. And I get kind of fancy once in a while. I'll get out some gaffer tape. And this one I put just a regular drinking straw inside the foil and wrapped her up tight with some gaffer tape, which kept the light from leaking out. And so as that, if I have a light leak, it will show up because I'm shooting in the dark. So you don't have to put a straw inside, but it keeps that foil from getting too smashed or from light sticking out. And it just makes for a real nice tight beam of light. And the real key is any one section of the flowers is only getting probably 2 seconds of light, and that pen is moving up and down and around and one side to the other side the whole time. And so it really gives you a different look by doing that. And the cool thing is you can do this anytime. Anytime you can get, I cover up my windows. My wife is like, uh-oh, here he goes again. He's got the black felt out. He's covering up the windows. But, just it doesn't have to be pitch black, but, it is easier when you're really in the dark and doing it. So just an old file cabinet that I have became kind of mysterious by just having streams of light on it. And sometimes I'll lock the shutter open on bulb, and I'll do however long it takes me to paint the light on whatever the object is. I'm shooting always at ISO 100. I'm usually at f16 or 11. And so once I open that shutter, I can just walk around and paint whatever I'm doing just up and down. And so you can see that the light's not smooth, and that's the look I'm going for. This one was about a 2-minute exposure, because the wood was so dark that I had to leave the light on certain spots a little bit longer to get that color to pop. So one of the questions I always get is, How long should the exposure be? And the answer is, I don't know. Just, I don't know. It's trial and error and making lots of mistakes. It depends on what flashlight I'm using, how tight I made the snoot, how far away from the object I am with the light. Doesn't matter how far the camera is, it's how far the light is away. And so I shoot a lot of bad ones to get a good one. So, it takes some practice and some patience, but immediately you'll see on the camera if you lit one area too much or another not enough, then you can try it again. And if you can even the light out, you can leave even the light out. It doesn't have to be streaky. It's however you want it to look. Sometimes I will composite them in Photoshop. I'll have one area that's too dark or too light, and as long as I'm shooting with the tripod, which I always do, my setup is exactly the same. So if I happen to have one area that's too light, I can just pull an exposure off another frame and composite them in Photoshop pretty easily. A fairly even light with a few highlights really brings out details. And so the added plus of this is having that light coming from multiple directions. So this is just a little lamp or a little light, or it's a clock, isn't it? It's a little clock that I had laying around. And so I put some light on the background, just a piece of plywood out in my garage, shine some light straight down to highlight the board it's sitting on. I did some backlight to get some highlights on the left side, some backlight on the right side, lit just the face of the clock, just washed a little bit at an angle. Anytime you light anything at an angle, you're going to pick up more detail, more texture. And so I'm always trying to be, I can say, I don't like saying never, but almost a never for me is having the light coming from the same direction as the camera. Anytime I do that, I'm going to end up with a flat light and I'm not going to like it. But when I have total control, like I do in this situation, I want that light coming from as far from the sides as I can to really pick up the detail and texture and things. So once I do something like this, I know that I can do it outside. So I can light up bigger things too. So this is a Lighthouse up in Acadia, Bass Harbor light, and everything you see there is lit up by me except the sky. I wish I could light up the sky, but I can't. So I had a workshop up there, and I took people down on the rocks, and there was a couple there a young couple from China, and she had a little flimsy tripod, and he didn't have a camera. And so as it started, the sun went down, I said, I'm going to light this place up, and it's going to look magnificent. And I'll tell you what the settings are. You can use my light. I don't care. And so she was like, okay. And as it started getting dark, the guy went back up the hill, and you can see we're out on these rocks, and it's pretty craggy there. So we shot for a while, and it got dark, and she got up to leave. And I noticed she didn't have a flashlight. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I stand up and I shine my light, being the nice guy I am, to give her a path out. And as she's walking, she disappears. I'm like, uh-oh, that's not good. So I scramble over the rocks, and she's laying down in between these jagged rocks and down the bottom, and has blood coming out of her forehead. And I'm like, this isn't good. So her guy saw it from up above, and he comes scrambling down. They didn't speak much English, and he says, "Where's nearest hospital?" I'm like, man, maybe 30 miles, So I gave her a little concussion test, and she seemed okay. And they walked up, and I said, 911? Yeah. So I said, when you get to the top, call 911. Don't try to get to the hospital. So it was about 45 minutes later before we went up, and they were gone. But so I always carry a flashlight in my camera bag because I never know where I'm going to be. A little one, just so I know what's up. But this again is a 30-second exposure, and any one section, probably 5 seconds of light on it. The lighthouse even less, and just painting the light across the scene, just shining, moving it the whole time. So just like the small lights, I'm not usually looking to light up the whole, or just like the small items, I'm not usually looking to light up the whole scene. I just want to light up enough to add some drama and depth to the picture. So this carousel, I lit up the carousel nice, then just a kiss of light back on the sign that said arcade. And it was near the road, and on the left side, it had cars streaking by. So I picked up the tail lights and the headlights of the cars going by. But this was again in pitch black, and it was about a 30-second exposure. So the moon shine on it helped a little bit. Getting some movement in the moon, which looked kind of cool, I thought. So I love shooting things with that long exposure going on.
Excuse me, Loren, if you can
Sure.
go back to that last photo.
Yep.
There's been a couple questions about do you use LED lights, and this one in particular was felt to be perhaps an LED light. Can you explain your light source on this one?
Yes, I'll show you later. This was lit with my Fat Max, which I'll show you later.
Do you ever use a laser pointer?
No, because it's too tight. It would just put a red line on things. So I'm usually trying to illuminate things. So for me, light painting is about painting objects with light, and sometimes I'll have the light source in the picture, but it's not. Some people call light painting having lights, a set of LED lights and swirling them around or doing something like that. That's not my type of light painting. I like to light things up with my light painting. And so I'll show you.
Okay, go ahead.
Martin, go ahead.
Do you ever put any mist through your light source?
Usually when I'm outside, I'm doing pretty big things, and I'm doing pretty long exposures. So I tried, while we're holed up here, my wife got some food that was shipped with dry ice. I thought, wonder what that looked like. So I took it out in the garage and poured some water on it and tried doing some cool things with the dry ice, and it sucked. So I tried. It just didn't work out. I don't know what I was doing wrong, but I do know what I was doing wrong. It was moving so much, and just I couldn't get the background and the ice. And by the time I got pretty close, I ran out of dry ice. So something like this, you need a fog machine, and no, I don't carry. I don't. Okay. I use natural fog occasionally, but.
All right.
So again, a 30-second exposure, painted a little bit on the left side, and then ran in the dark over to the right and shot the light in from the right side. And as I get older, I've got to figure out a better way to do this, because I was pretty huffy and puffy by the time I tried it 30 or 40 times to running from one side to the other in the dark and getting the light just right. But at night with even a cloudy night, if the moon's out, the sky can look really pretty cool. And so my workhorse is my Stanley Fat Max. I take this sucker with me everywhere. And I list my gear on my website on lorenphotos.com/gear. So there are links to wherever I buy all this stuff. So two that I use the most is the Stanley Fat Max. And then I also like the Nebo Redline Flex 450. So it's a 450 lumen flashlight, just a little sucker. And that one you can focus the gear or focus the beam, and you can get a pretty tight beam on that thing for doing bigger things. But the Fat Max, that baby goes with me everywhere. And I light up a lot of stuff with that thing. It is a little bit, not a little bit, it is a lot on the cool side. So the light out of it, and it's an LED light, but the light is blue. And I took the front glass off, so that black plastic you see, that popped off, and then I taped in some CTO orange filter. So I changed the blue to basically a daylight balance. And so that makes a much nicer light. So it mixes better. Actually, it's on the warm side, which I like, because I do, when you're doing night stuff, if you warm up the light source, that'll make the sky go even bluer. So Fat Max is my baby, and I have a couple of them. And I tricked this one out. I put a carabiner on it so I can clip it to my belt or whatever. And I've hauled that thing all over the place. So just by using that and kicking in some light from the side, turns a pretty average shot into something kind of nice. So, you know, I live in Somerville, New Jersey, which is not the most photogenic place in the world, right? And so we have a fountain downtown, and you know, at night it's not much. But if I get my flashlights out and light that baby up, now it's looking pretty cool. You know, so not only do I like the fountain itself and the foreground, but the building across the street on both sides, I kick some light on that just to light her up. So again, I'll look at the scene again. So the foreground is dark, the fountain is dark, the hotel across the way, the sign's barely seen. But again, watch the sign and the buildings as that comes up, and just love what happens when you put that 30-second exposure out there. Again, ISO 100. Probably everything you see tonight will be ISO 100 until we get to astrophotography. And then just shining the light to match whatever existing light there is.
Loren, there's been a few questions related to that. Could you explain how you're getting such even lighting by doing only one shot instead of composites?
I'm damn good. No, yeah, it's just a matter of spreading the light out, and not having such a tight beam that you end up with streaks on it. So during 30 seconds, you know, again, on the fountain, probably any one section's only getting 2 or 3 seconds of light, and that's enough. And so just with practice, I'm able to shine the light and be able to feel or smell, or I don't know what it is, but I can pretty much tell how much light I put on each piece of it. And you know, if you look at it, it's not perfectly lit, you know, like it would be if I had a big strobe and softbox out there and tried to light up the whole thing. The left side of it's darker than the right side. There's some, you know, hot spots in the middle, but that's okay. I don't know, that's the look I'm going for. And so just by keeping that light moving and not let it stop in any one spot. If you let it stop, you get a hot spot. And you know, I don't do this in one shot. I mean, this is one shot, but it takes, you know, I try it probably 20 times. You know, I might get 2 or 3 really good ones out of 20.
And are you always staying behind your camera when you're doing this, Loren, or do you ever walk in front of the camera during these 30-second exposures?
Yes, definitely walk in front of the camera. In this shot, no, because I would show up because of all the street lights. But in a dark scene, yes, and I'll show you some later where I'll point out where I walked. And if you're, you know, if there's no light hitting me, and I'm not in between the light, whatever being lit up, and the camera, I'm not going to show up because there's just no light on me, so I can't show up. So yes, I'm in my photos all the time, and I do workshops, and I purposely walk out in front of everybody's cameras, and they're all screaming at me, "You're in the shot, you're in the shot." And I said, just wait. And they go, "Where'd you go?" "No light on me, I can't show up." So any other questions at this point? We've got more to come.
Yep, I'll hold them. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is a cool library here in Woodstock, Vermont. They light up the books in the archway there, but it's dark. You know, the front of it's dark until I get out flashlights and just kick enough light up there to make those, you know, to even out the light with the interior light. So the trick is figuring out what the exposure is for whatever existing light there might be, and then adding that amount of light to the scene. So again, this is a 30-second exposure, f11, ISO 100. So I have to put f11 amount of light onto that building. Time doesn't really matter for the light painting, but the time matters for the existing light. So I have to first figure out what the proper exposure is for inside the building. then add that, make sure I can put that much light in on the outside. So this one I actually used 2 flashlights. I had a friend doing the left side and I painted the right side. So 2 of us are painting at once to get enough light with 2 of my Fat Maxes to light that baby up. So again, a beautiful scene here in Vermont. I'm exposing for the sky, want my sky exposure to be right. This is a waterfall and there's a light there that shines on the waterfall. So there you go. Figure out what's the exposure for the sky. And crazily enough, it's almost always, I'm out there shooting when it's 30 seconds at f11. And then kicking in the light myself, lighting up the trees, lighting up the waterfall itself, lighting up the buildings on the right. And suddenly I have a very different picture than the other. So again, here I had to use 2 flashlights and I was doing it myself. So I'm hanging out, I'm up on a bridge. So I'm hanging over the bridge with 2 flashlights, 1 in each hand, 1 aiming at the left side, 1 aiming at the right. So I try to balance them out and I probably did 40 shots to get this one. But just aiming all over the place and then shining it down just to get the waterfalls and everything just right. And it's just a lot of fun to try to get all of that working at once. But I don't get mad when I do it wrong. You know, let's just try it again. So just like the boring pizza box, you know, a rather mundane scene can look pretty special when you just wait a while and light it up. So you may have noticed a lot of my night shots are done in the blue hour, which is that period of time about 20 minutes after sunset that lasts 15 or 20 minutes, or before sunrise, 20 minutes before sunrise and 20 minutes before that. And every day the sky turns this color blue, no matter the weather. Doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, sunshine, clear, cloudy, whatever, you get this color blue. So then it's just a matter of figuring out what's the exposure for the sky, and then how much light do I need to put on this scene to match that. And one of the things I love doing is personal projects, challenging myself to come up with a subject and photograph it and see what I can get out of it. And one of them was 106 covered bridges of Vermont. And I can tell you, after you've seen about 50 of them, they all look the same. So I was up in very northern Vermont, and this is the Connecticut River, which, you know, you could have kicked a stone across at that point. And I was about 3 hours from my house, and it was cold and rainy and just icky, and the bridge was ugly. And I'm thinking, I don't want to come back here. I need to get this shot. What am I gonna do? It's you know, it's getting dark out, so I'll wait for blue hour. Okay, blue hour was okay. Well, that just didn't work. So I broke out one of those little pen lights and I lit up the end of the bridge and I waited for a car to come through. Suddenly I got my shot. You know, and this one I did just very little lighting. I just lit up where it says Columbia Bridge. Again, a 30-second exposure, and I had a mag light and just shined the mag light right up there on the top, and then the car lit up the rest of it. And I think maybe I stood out there for, I don't know, 45 minutes in the cold rain, and maybe 3 cars went by, right? It's like, yeah, come on, people, somebody's gonna drive by. Yeah. So, you know, I love when I get one of those cars streaking by. So one of my favorite subjects is here in Woodstock, just down the street from my house. And so I always take workshops over there, and we're lighting up the bridge, and the people who live next door, I finally met them, and because I'm always shining my flashlight in their windows, and I know they wonder what the hell's going on. But again, this is dark on the end, so I'm lighting up the end of the bridge and the fence. And you know, in the winter they put Christmas lights on it, and you know, I know I'm annoying the neighbors, but they get over it. So, one night I was out there with the group, and the police officer stopped by, and so I walked over to say hi, and I said, you know, it looks really cool when cars drive through, and the tail lights bounce when they hit the bridge, and we get these nice red lights bouncing through and nice streaks. And he says, you want me to turn on my blue lights? I said, yes, I do. So he went around and came around and he lit up the baby and I lit up the bridge, and it's like, woo, thank you, officer. So that was just a fun night to get a little extra something going on there. So again, the key to determining the exposure is figure out what that sky is or whatever light is in there. And then match that intensity with flashlight. So this is a little covered bridge up in north central Vermont, sits out in the middle of a field. And in this case, I wanted to have the beam of light shining on it because it looks just damn weird for a bridge to be glowing out in the middle of a field. So I made sure I did a trail of light on the grass out to the bridge. And again, a 30-second exposure. That's when I probably dropped it down to F4 to get enough light in the sky. But whatever it takes to light it up. This is with the Fat Max again. The lavender field in Provence, France. Was like we're shooting lavender all day, and that's damn cool. What can I do different? So we were having the workshop I was leading. I like to do tailgate parties out in the middle of cool places. So we were having wine and cheese and sausage out in the middle of this lavender field. So I said, "You guys want to shoot the lavender tonight?" And they're looking at me like, it's dark out, right? I said, "Yeah, I know." So I got out the Fat Max and stood up on top of the rental car. Didn't realize the roof would cave in as much as it did, but just shining the light back and forth across the field. And of course, the farther away you are, the longer you have to hold the light out there. So just trying to match that light from my flashlight to the sky. And in this case, I'm standing up on top of the van to get the angle on the light. And so I have to yell down to them, "How'd that one look?" And they're like, "Well, a little too much on the right side." Okay. We'll do it better this time. So 10, 15 shots, we got a couple that were pretty good. So this is over in Bucks County, PA, again with the Fat Max. Just love the late blue hour and the light coming on through the river, reflecting on the river, and just doing that 30-second exposure, which tends to be the magic number for me. Again, ISO 100. Doing a workshop in New York in Central Park, and blue hour was coming in. We're shooting the Bow Bridge in Central Park, and I'd left the Fat Max in my van, and one of the other photographers had a nice little compact flashlight. So I said, "Hey, let me use that sucker." So I lit up Bow Bridge with this just nice little flashlight. Again, to do it evenly, the farther away the subject is, the longer you need to light it. So I had to aim the light at the far end, probably 3 times as long as the close end, and then just feather it back and just keeping it moving the whole time so I don't get a hot spot. But it's a fun way to add some cool light to a scene that otherwise would have been not too exciting with a dark bridge there.
Loren,
yes.
Look at the chat. There's the next to last question. There's a specific flashlight, an EAG TAC with a special LED light. Do you have any experience with that particular flashlight?
I don't. I do have a couple of TAC lights. What tends to happen with them is they can be very, very blue, very cool light. So you'll have to put some filters over them to warm them up, to get that light to be closer to daylight. Otherwise, you're going to end up, and I'll show you an example here in about 3 pictures of what the blue light will do. But any light can work. Any light can work. It depends what you're shooting.
Rick follows that up with the Nishia 219 LED, which he says is a natural white at 5,000 Kelvin.
Cool. I need to look that one up.
Yeah.
With my slideshow thing going here, I can't see the chat. So
okay.
When I stop, I will save the chat messages so I can look that one up. I appreciate learning about new lights all the time. It's weird. I go into I go into Home Depot and they go, oh, hey, Loren, you know, like cheers. And I'll be in the flashlight section and I'll have 3 or 4 lights on at the same time looking at the color of them. And I know those guys are standing over there going, what the hell is he doing this time? But yeah, I'm always looking for the warmest light I can find. But I still gel them. I still put filters on.
Yeah, there's been a couple of questions about that. Can you talk about purposely changing the color using gels instead of changing your light bulbs?
Yeah, I don't ever change the bulbs. Yeah, it's just a matter of what the light source is that you're trying to match or what you're trying to do. So for the things that I do inside where it's the only light source is the flashlight, it just doesn't matter what color the light is because I'm going to color correct it in Lightroom or Photoshop anyway, since I'm shooting raw files. So for doing that kind of work, like the first pictures that we saw, just doesn't matter what color the light is. This is a shot in Brooklyn, so to match the street lights, you know, that's a little trickier to figure out what color the lights are. But I carry it's called CTO, colored, you know, orange. CTO is orange gels, orange filters. You know, they're filters. They're not screw-in type filters. They're like cellophane, but they're not. But you could use cellophane. It wouldn't matter. So, you know, I carry several sheets of that in my camera bag all the time, and I'm always crinkling that stuff up and putting it over a light and seeing how much I needed to change it or leave it.
There was a question related to your color balance and your white balance, and do you play with that in your camera, or do you wait until you get back for post?
No, I wait for post because
So
I
use.
Pardon me?
What are you using for your white balance?
Well, I process everything initially in Lightroom. So
in camera, is it?
In camera, it's usually set on auto, which is the only thing I do auto because it doesn't matter. So if I'm doing a panorama or something like that, then I will set it at something. And it just doesn't matter really. Usually it's daylight. I'll set it at daylight, and then that way I know every shot is the same and I don't have to worry about correcting them. It's easier, but most of the time my camera is set on auto white balance. And again, if I have multiple shots, I'll go into Lightroom and set them all at the same white balance.
Can you answer a question about the lens you're using? Do you, you said that you're doing a lot of f11 shots, and the question was, do I need a 2.8 lens to do these outside shots, or is an f4?
Now if you're shooting at f11, no, not at all. I mean, the only thing the 2.8 lenses will help you with is seeing through the camera. It just makes the scene look brighter when you're trying to line things up in the dark, which is a trick. But f11's f11. And the reason I'm usually shooting at f11 is to get a long enough exposure to do my light painting. So this scene isn't typical, but like the bridges, you know, when I take workshops out, you know, they're always anxious to shoot right away, and we'll start shooting at 8 seconds, but I can't light up a whole bridge in 8 seconds because I need more time to cover the whole thing. So, you know, they're always like, that doesn't look good. I said, just wait. And then when we get to 30 seconds, I have the time to cover the whole bridge with my light and get that nice dark or that nice deep blue sky behind it. So this one, the car on the right was just pretty dark, and so was part of the building. So I just kicked some light on the car, kicked some light on the building, and the street lights were the main light, and my flashlight was the fill light. So, you know, I don't have to light up everything. Sometimes just kicking a little bit of light in will help something stand out. So I was in Venice, and I liked this scene, but I didn't like how dark that building was going down along the canal. So I didn't have my Fat Max with me that night. I had it in Venice, but I didn't have it with me because I was too lazy. But I had my, it was a tack light with me. And so I got it out, and I just decided to put a little bit of light down on that wall down there. And so you can see the color difference because the street lights were really, really orange. And even though I had some filter on that, I didn't have enough filter. By the time I piled enough filter on it, it would have been too dim to be able to see. So I just let it go blue. And I thought, no, that kind of looks kind of cool, like having that blue light down there. So you can see the color balance difference there. If I hated it, I would go into Photoshop and change that one wall and bring it back to something else. But I kind of like the look of the blue, so I thought I'm going to leave that. But you can definitely see what happens if you don't filter, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So, but I didn't want to make that too bright. I didn't want that to be the brightest part of the picture. I just wanted to add a little detail down in there and give the picture some depth. So, just a little light can make a huge difference. This one I lit with my iPhone, just a 30-second exposure again, and just walking along, shining lighting up those posts in the foreground with the iPhone, and just kicking that little bit of light in there. It doesn't have to always be a big thing either. So I was out in the forest and I saw this real cool looking maple leaf had fallen down in between some birch trees. And I was doing about an 8-second exposure at f11 ISO 100 out there. And I thought, this just looks blah. What can I do? Oh yeah. So I got out my little mag light and got it off to the side and just kicked the light in from the side, which illuminated the leaf real nice and added just tremendous detail to the trees. And so just getting that angled light, love the shadows. I love creating shadows. What happens when you put shadows in things, and adding that texture just really made a huge difference. And just a simple thing, I'm just kicking some light in to make my main subject pop. I love this funky birch tree growing, and it was blending in with the backgrounds too much. So again, I got out my little flashlight, my little mag light. This is a 5-second exposure, and just lit up the birch tree in the foreground, and it just made it jump out from the rest of it. You don't always have to blast it with light. First time I went to Iceland a couple of years ago, I got there, I was doing a workshop and I got there a day early and I wanted to go photograph this spot. And I got up at like 3 in the morning and drove up from Reykjavik. It was about a 3-hour drive, 2.5-hour drive, and driving through the dark, and I get there and it's still dark, and I'm thinking that's where the waterfalls is supposed to be. And I had my Fat Max and I shine it out there and all I see is ice. I'm like, you really didn't think through that in northern Iceland in February, waterfall might be a little frozen. So sure enough, it was frozen as hell, but it was still pretty cool. So rather than just making, overpowering it with light, I just kicked a little light in there to make that ice jump out a little bit. I didn't want it to be overpowering, just a little bit of light. Another shot with the iPhone as a light source. So this one, I'm in the picture the whole time. So I tripped the shutter. I hit the shutter, locked it down, 30-second exposure, walked up to the bridge, popped on my iPhone flashlight, hit the bridge a little bit, and walked back and just put a little bit of light on the road. And it was pitch black out there. And so since I'm not in between the subject being lit and the camera, and there's no light hitting me, I don't show up. I'm just not there. I don't exist. So it's just a cool effect. So sometimes I have a little fun with light too. I use little light cubes and put some colored filters on them and set them inside a bridge, and then lightly, slightly lit the outside of the bridge with white light and Milky Way. I can't decide if I like this one or not. I lean more to not liking it. Too much color, too unusual, but it's kind of fun. But I'll light up all kinds of things, little junk truck, and use the light cubes again. Put one inside this cab, one up under the front, one under the back, and then light up the rest of the truck with my my Fat Max. And I usually want to try to light up the background too. So I want to have some light on the background. Otherwise, it's just this truck sitting there in black darkness. So just kicking a little bit of light, you know, you can almost see my light, you know, on the, especially on the right side where I just, my beams of light, just shining the light, just making streaks of light back there. They don't have to make sense, just have to give a little bit more depth to the picture. So again, this was, you know, pitch black. You couldn't see a thing without the flashlight. And so, you know, the tricky part is how do you line up your shot, and how do you compose, and how do you focus? So I just turn on the flashlight and shine it around and light it up and compose, you know, with the flashlight in hand and composing the shot. I do a lot of astrophotography, and I have a lens, this cheap old Rokinon 14 millimeter f2.8, and it is full manual, and I got it dirt cheap on sale sometime. I don't know, 225 bucks. And I thought, it can't be sharp, but boy, it is. And the only thing I use it for is astrophotography. So I have the focus taped down, little gaffer tape on the lens at infinity. So with a 14 millimeter lens at infinity, anything from about 3 feet to the end of the universe is in focus. So I don't have to worry about focusing in the dark. I pre-focus at infinity on most things, but on something like this, you know, if you hold the flashlight on it, you can see it well enough to focus, and even probably your autofocus would work on if you're shining the light bright enough on this. Again, a cool scene. Loved what happened with the moon lighting the sky, but it was just a little boring until I broke out the flashlights. Then I have something special. So this is again with the Fat Max. But sometimes I shoot some things that are a little bit bigger and I need a little bit more light. So this island in Vermont that I shot a couple of years ago. And again, it's a 30-second exposure, ISO 100, and just painting the light up and down and across the island. And I'd put in a special request for a shooting star, and it came in right on time. So it's always good to have connections when you're out shooting. But just getting that light even across there, and I'm about 250 yards away. And this one I use what I call my big ass flashlight, which is Cyclops. Cyclops is an 18 million candle power beast, and that's my little Nebo sitting beside it. So this sucker will light up a lot of things in the distance. It has a pretty focused beam, and it's pretty cool. So I did that island again last fall, and you know, once you figure out that technique, it's really repeatable. So I just love putting light on some things that are pretty far away. So I take my fall foliage workshop to this spot and I light it up for them. And actually, it's funny, I had a woman from Colorado come last fall, and she said, you know, when she got here, she said, I saw your picture of the island lit up. I said, yeah. She said, I need that shot. I said, okay. She says, the reason I came here is for that shot. It's like, put the pressure on me, will you, lady? So we got her that shot, and this was that night. So that was a lot of fun.
Loren, can you address the light on the water? Was that just coming down from the trees? Did you hit the water at all with your light?
No, so that's reflection off of the trees on the island. So if you shine the light on the water, nothing's going to happen because the light's going to bounce off and go out into the distance. So the mountains in the background are far enough away that my light doesn't have any power by the time it gets to them, but it has enough to light up the island itself. So the first time I did this, and I was chimping my photos, I was like, whoa! Didn't think about the reflection. You know, it was a calm night, and so yeah. Now I anticipate what's the reflection going to do, and the sky was bright enough. You know, you could see the reflection of the mountains in the water, so I knew that was going to be there, and I knew that because I'd done this enough now that I knew that the reflection of the island would look pretty sweet there too. And, you know, like I say, when you're chimping, you can see that. But I'll haul that Cyclops around a little bit. This is a waterfall out in Oregon. Uh, the bad thing about Cyclops is it takes up about half of a suitcase. So it's pretty tough to haul with you, but unless you're willing to pay for extra baggage. But this one is actually 4 different shots composited because I couldn't in 30 seconds, and I couldn't do a longer exposure because the moon was so bright that it was lighting up everything. So my sky, when I tried to do a longer exposure, my sky just became way too bright. So I lit it up in 4 sections, and I missed a section at the bottom. I wish I would have been able to get more on the bottom, but it just, you know, I'm out there in the middle of nowhere, Oregon, and just missed that. Just couldn't tell that I didn't have that. So wish I had that shot back again, but I'll get it again someday. But just standing back, lighting up a lighthouse. This is down Cape May, New Jersey, and the bottom 1/8 of the thing is lit up, and then I light up the rest of it, and just do that long exposure with the wide angle to get those clouds streaming at you, and let all the lights work together, and so I have to overpower the ugly orange street lights on the bottom to blow them out, and then let the rest work itself together. So this was a beaver pond up in Maine, and I thought that'd be pretty cool to light up a beaver pond at night. So I had the Cyclops, and I was hitting the different hutches around in this beaver pond, and a beaver swam by, and I thought, oh, yeah, I'll just put the light on him. And so I did, and he smacked his tail and went down. And I said, oh, thank you, Mr. Beaver. So now I got a nice splash of the beaver and all the other things. So I'll try some weird things and see what'll happen. I was down in Florida shooting on a pond, and all these herons and egrets were flying in and roosting on the other side of this lake. And I thought, oh man, and it was, you know, facing straight west, so they were backlit as hell. And I thought, wonder what would happen if I light them up. So my car was about, you know, a quarter mile, half a mile away. So I hiked back to my car to come back with the Cyclops and light them up. And it's like, well, that just looks weird. You know, what the hell is that? It's just a bunch of herons and egrets sitting in trees. You know, and they were kind of freaking out, like, what the hell's all this light over here? But it's just a lot of fun to do those kind of things. So we're talking about color temperature, lights, and here's an example. I was in a small Italian square, and the street lights were pretty yellow, and there's no light hitting the statue in the fountain. So my Fat Max looked really blue compared to the street lights. So again, I stuck an extra CTO orange on there, and but still it was much warmer than the street lights. So but that's okay. You know, when you have those orange street lights, the sky becomes even more blue. So as I warmed up, or as I cooled off the orange street lights, it made the sky go to even in a deeper blue. And then I think the statue looks kind of cool having that different color light on it. And you know, most people wouldn't think about the light being a different color. They think the statue's that color, but it was probably gray or something, you know. So just getting that mixture to blend is a lot of fun too. And just the tree standing out in the field isn't too interesting until you hit light, you know, and get the moon coming over the top and lights from a couple of angles and you know, shine it from the left, run over the other side of the camera, shine it from the right, and things work out. You know, I find myself shooting in cemeteries a lot. I don't know if I'm just, you know, I know I'm kind of strange, but I don't know how strange that is. But they're open space, you know, I'm not bothering anybody that I know of. And there's always something cool in the foreground to light up. So I'm always out in cemeteries lighting them up. This one's in New Jersey. So, you know, the sky is not going to have a lot going on other than airplanes flying through and power lines. But just bringing that light at an angle again. You know, I love that directional light, getting that light coming from an angle, just throwing some shadows that become really cool. This is another cemetery up in northern Vermont, and just getting that light coming from the side as much as I can without getting the light itself in the picture, and dropping those shadows across there to give it that kind of extra eerie feel. I was down in Chile last year, and you know, I love doing some astrophotography, and I was there for the total solar eclipse, and it's one of the, you know, where I was at the edge of Atacama Desert, and it's one of the darkest places on Earth. So I got to try some Milky Way stuff because it's going the wrong direction, you know, in South America. And driving along, and I saw this pull off, so I pulled off just to find something, and there was this nice overstuffed chair sitting there. I'm like, what's the chances of me pulling off and finding this god awful ugly chair sitting out in the middle of nowhere? So oh, thank you, you know, thank you very much. I'll light it up. And you know, the astro gods were looking over me that night. But it's just, you know, again, getting that angled light on it though makes a huge difference. And I love shooting the Milky Way, but I want to have something more than just the sky. So I want to get something in the foreground. So this is a sculpture park in Middlebury, Vermont, that's out in the middle of a field, totally dark, and this really cool metal sculpture sitting there. So again, I lit it from the left and lit it from the right, and this one I'm actually using my headlamp to light it up, and just trying to get that light even coming from both directions to give it that kind of weird feel of where the hell's that light coming from. And I just love the way the sculpture is looking up at the Milky Way, and getting some light pollution on the horizon, but that was okay.
Loren?
Yes.
Question, how do you determine how close you bring the light to your subjects, like this one and the cemetery ones?
So the closer the light is to the subject, the brighter the light will be. So two things control how bright the luminance of something is. It's how long the light is shining on it and how far away the light is from it. So when I'm doing like a Milky Way shot, I don't want to do longer than a 30-second exposure because my stars will start becoming streaks rather than dots. So I can't go longer than 30 seconds with my 14mm lens. So if in 30 seconds I can't get enough light on it, I have to get the light closer to get it bright enough. So it is just a factor of how long or how bright you need that light to be, how bright your light is, and also how broad or how tight your beam is. So if you're trying to, so this one I wanted a fairly even light on it as opposed to the sneaker that we saw initially. So I used a flashlight that the beam was spread out a little bit more. If I had a flashlight that had a spotlight and was a pretty tight beam, I would have to get back farther to get a broad, even light off of it. And so that's why I used my headlamp on this one, because the headlamp spreads out the light pretty evenly. Did that make sense?
Yes, it does. And which light source did you use for that big lighthouse in Cape May?
My Cyclops. Because by the time you get a light up to the top of that thing, you're pretty far away. So maybe 200 yards. So that's at 18 million candle power. And on my website, which I'll show you again at the end of the presentation, on my gear page, I have a link to the Cyclops if you want to look into that.
With a shot like this, with a night sky with detail with the Milky Way, can you review your lens setting and your time?
Sure, 30 seconds. And this is ISO 3200 to get the Milky Way at 2.8. And this is with that 14mm lens. So, and I'm at, have it taped down, the focus taped down to infinity. Because it was dark out there. It's funny, I was shooting with another photographer, and by now it's like 2 in the morning, and he's a little bit older than me, and neither one of us are used to being up at 2 in the morning. And we had an hour-and-a-half drive back home. And I shot this last because I knew where the Milky Way was, and I knew where I wanted it to be, and it was starting to stand up more. And so I shot it, and I was looking at it and chimping away, and I said, "Hey Bob, you might want to come over and try this." He goes, "Yeah, I bet." said, Bob, you want to come over and try this? He said, nah, I already got my tripod put away. I said, Bob, you want to try this? He said, nah, I'll get it next time. So next day in the afternoon, I sent him the shot, and he goes, damn, I should have come over and tried it. Yeah, well, listen to me next time. So you know, it was a lot of fun just getting out there and shooting just wacky things.
With these night shots, like in the cemetery, is your histogram of any, is it reliable for you? Do you use it?
No, I never look at a histogram. All histogram can tell you is if your blacks are black and if your whites are white, and at night your blacks are always going to be black, and so everything in between tells you nothing. So it's not a benefit at all.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So in the same sculpture park, while I was shooting the other things, I set another camera up on another sculpture and let it run for a couple hours. And so doing star streaks, which you can photograph star streaks pretty much anywhere. Again, we had a lot of more light pollution on the horizon than I would have expected, but this is actually ran about 2.5 hours, so it was about 280 photos, and each one was 30 seconds long. And then I had the camera pause for 1 second, and then another shot. So 30-second exposure, pause for a second, 30 seconds, pause, 30 seconds for 2.5 hours, and then put them together in the computer using a program called Star Stacks, S-T-A-X, S-T-A-R-S, Star Stacks, S-T-A-X.com. Free program for Mac and Windows. And it does a hell of a job putting together pictures. And so I just needed to know where Polaris, the North Star, is, and I lined it up in between this sculpture and just let it rip and went off to another part of the park and shot some stuff, and then came back and lit up the side for a couple of shots, tried 3 or 4 different shots of lighting it different ways, and ended up being pretty darn cool. But, you know, I got a couple of airplanes flying through, and you get all kinds of stuff. But nice thing about Vermont is not much air traffic. But sometimes, you know, I want to light most of the scene. So this is just a little pond up here in Vermont, and you know, hitting those trees, trying to get some angle on them, knowing I'm going to get some reflection of the stars in the water in the pond also, and using photo pills, an app to figure out where the galactic center of the Milky Way, which is the brightest part of the Milky Way, where that's going to be. So I knew it was going to be right there between those trees at the end of the pond. And yes, I need to be there at the right time. And again, it's a 30-second exposure, f2.8 with that 14mm lens, ISO 3200 to get enough exposure to get that sky, get the Milky Way lighting up. So when I'm at 3200, and if I'm doing a 30-second exposure, my flashlight, this with the Fat Max again, probably only on total 5 seconds in entirety. So I'm just whipping that light across there because at 3200, it just doesn't take much light at all. It'll just really, maybe a little more than 5 seconds, but any one spot will not get a second worth of light because it'll be just way overexposed. And so it takes a lot of mistakes when you're trying to light that fast. And I'll dim down I'll filter my Fat Max with a clear, not a clear, a translucent, a white grocery store bag. And so that'll knock the brightness down a little bit, but it also spreads out the light. And so sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But you never know. You got to give it a try. So one night I was doing some Milky Ways and set up a camera to shoot the star trails, and I was overshooting the Milky Way, and I have an app that tells me when the International Space Station is going to fly over, because I just like watching that. I want to take a ride. They won't let me. So watching the space station, and I'm thinking, you know, I bet that's going to be in that shot of the other camera sitting over there doing the star trails. I bet I got that, baby. So I lit up the other side of the pond and And I put the thing together the next day, and sure enough, I got the International Space Station going right through Polaris. And I'm like, damn, I'm good. You know, how I'm so lucky. You know, if I would have planned for the International Space Station to go through Polaris, I would have been standing out there for hours trying to calculate that. But just being dumb luck is a lot better. So that's just a lot of fun. You never know what you're going to get. So again, a little light can be better than a lot of light. So this was down in Chile again, and just kicked a little light on the cabin that I was staying in, and doing a panorama shot of the arc of the Milky Way. And then the lights in distant towns were just lighting up the mountains down there, which is really cool. But I could have lit up that whole foreground, but I just wanted to have that just a little kiss of light on that cabin, and then let the rest of the scene take it over. Again, it'd be just so easy to overpower the shot with too much light. So on a night shot, I want it to have the feel of being at night. I don't want to make it feel like daylight. I just want to give it that little bit of light. So this one again is lit with my headlamp. Because at 3200 ISO to do the Milky Way, I don't need much light at all. Just very little light will take care of it. It's really amazing how little light you need when you're out there doing it. And sometimes I like to have the light in the shot. So I wanted that barn down on the bottom to not just be glowing in the darkness. I wanted to have the grass lit up, and so shine the light on the grass. And of course I tried some without it, but tried some with it and just see which one I like later. One of the beautiful things about digital is don't have to get it right in the field. Try a bunch of different ways, and whatever works. And if it didn't work, you didn't try enough different things. So again, just getting that light. This is it's really hard to find a barn that is in pitch black, because to do light painting, you don't want any other lights shining on it, because especially if you're doing some Milky Way stuff and you're doing such a long exposure at high ISO that any little light source is going to just blow out anything. So to find something that has absolutely no light on it is really pretty tricky. I've got a lot of locations that I've found now, but it takes a lot of driving around and knocking on doors and saying, do you leave a light on out there at night? And they're like, what? I want to photograph your barn. No, we'll leave the lights on for you. No, turn them off. So, it's just a matter of finding a spot and putting some light down and lighting it different ways. This one, I just put that nice soft light coming in from that angle to light up the whole fence and this little shed out in the field. I did some with the Fat Max and just blasted it, and it looked like hell. It's like, this needs a soft light. This needs a soft light. I don't want any ambient light at all. I don't want the moonshine if I'm doing Milky Way, because the sky will get too bright. So this week coming up is going to be, the new moon on Monday. So this is a great week to get out and shoot Milky Way or night stuff, because it won't have any moon messing you up. But just doesn't take much light. Again, this is with my headlamp, and I put my orange filter over the headlamp because it's, again, a pretty cool LED light. So I want to match that. I want to make it as warm a light as I can. And I just walked along the fence line here with my headlamp, just lighting it up. And again, any spot on there probably got maybe a second of light. With the headlamp, it's a pretty broad light, so it's not too pinpointy. And I'll do some funky things. I'll stick the light inside the windows. It's in a little one-room schoolhouse sitting out in the middle of nowhere. And so I shined the light inside to make the windows glow. Then I just held my Fat Max up into the sky and let it project a beam up into the sky to do something a little bit different. Or I make myself the shot. So I've got the Milky Way, and I just didn't have much foreground. It was a cool overlook. So I wonder what would happen if I walk down the road, just try to light up the road a little bit and let myself glow. And it looks kind of fun. So You know, don't, again, I tried some lighting up as much as I could of the field in the foreground, but it just didn't look, yeah, I don't know, it didn't look very good. So let's try some, just putting a little bit of light on the road to jaunt the viewer's imagination. Yeah. And, you know, the star trails are a lot of fun, but unless you have something in the foreground, you know, they all look alike real quick. So just kicking that little bit of light in on the covered bridge makes it a lot of fun. And, you know, the whole key is finding some darkness and then get out the flashlight and see what flies past while you're lighting something. All kinds of wacky things happen. You know, if you're doing the star trails, you don't have to aim at the North Star. You can do, you know, this one's aiming east, and so it's giving you some weird directions on the stars as they're spinning around. It's just, you know, it's just a matter of getting out there with flashlight or in your closet. Doesn't matter where you are, as long as you have some darkness, and just light it up with your flashlight, see what happens. Mess up lots of pictures and hit on a few, and you got it. And that's the whole key to it. So like I said, all the gear is listed on my website at lorenphotos.com/gear. And there's some other things on there, but I don't list all my cameras and all that stuff, just the wacky stuff that I use. Any other questions, thoughts?
Yes, we have a couple, and then we'll open it up. If everyone wants to, you can go to gallery view if you like. Loren, how about the lady slippers in Woodstock? Someone wants to know if you've ever shot them.
Yes. I am not a great flower photographer. And so while I appreciate them, I've photographed them, and I have not made a picture that I would show anybody other than how not to shoot lady slippers. I haven't tried them at night, so maybe that's what I need to do is go down there and light those babies up a little bit. I hadn't thought about that. So,
how about a star tracker for your Milky Way shots? Have you used one?
I do have a star tracker. The problem with the star tracker is it's moving, so any foreground is going to be blurred. So you can do some deep sky shots, and you can get some better Milky Ways. But I like having the foreground. I like having something in the foreground and lighting up that foreground. So I bought a star tracker. I'm an eclipse chaser now. It's official. So I bought one to track the eclipse. And do some things with that. And I've tried it on stars, and I tried it with the Milky Way. But like I say, if the camera's moving, the foreground's going to be a blur. So I'm not big on compositing things that are, you know, if I do multiple shots of the exact same thing, I'll composite them. But I'm not going to take a shot of the Milky Way that I did in Chile and try to put it in a foreground that I shot in Vermont. You know, wouldn't take many people to figure out, wait a minute, the Milky Way is going the wrong direction. But you know, I've seen people put together composites, and you know, they shoot a foreground in you know, outside of New York City with a you know, Milky Way they shot in Death Valley, and so the Milky Way is extremely bright, and I'm like, there is no way you're going to see the Milky Way that bright in New York State, down near New York. So I like to keep things looking as close to real as I can.
And the last question I have you gone to the grounds for sculpture in Trenton? And
yes.
photographed it at night?
I have not done it at night. I was planning on that this year. I've done.
You can bring Dave with you.
Yeah.
Okay. I've done several other sculpture parks. I've been there during the day quite a bit. So that one, you have to get permission to be there at night. The ones up here in Vermont are just literally out in the middle of a field. You just walk out there and you don't have to say hi to anybody. So it's pretty fun.
One of Bob suggests using a 10 stop neutral density to light paint in the daytime. Have you done that?
You could. I mean, it's tough to knock down. If it's a cloudy day, on a sunny day, there's no way you're gonna get a 30-second exposure out of something. So, that could work during the day. The problem is, that 10-stop ND is also making your flashlight darker. So you really have to have a much brighter flashlight during the daytime than you do at nighttime. So no matter, anytime you put an ND on, you're darkening everything. So it would take a much brighter flashlight during the day, because the relative light versus the dark, the lightness of the flashlight is still going to be the same relative brightness as whatever the sunlight is, or daylight. So that'd be pretty tough balance to strike.
Well, I think I've hit all the questions that came through. Loren, the presentation was fantastic. We had 37 people
Cool.
sign in for almost the entire time, and everyone's hanging out. It's been a great night. Any other questions? People want to chime in? You can unmute yourself. A lot of good comments in the chat room. I'll copy the chat room, Loren, and send that to you.
Great, thank you.
And it has that flashlight that was referenced with the that tack light.
Yeah, I appreciate
LED.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm always out there searching for stuff. So,
Loren, I have a question.
Sure.
Is it possible to simulate light painting by doing a normal exposure, then using dodging and burning? I think it could be possible to do somewhat of what you're doing, but you wouldn't get the light from different angles, which is, I think, the thing that makes it really the most interesting.
Yeah, I do too. Yes, you could get the I guess blotchiness of it by dodging, but it's that angled light that makes them look really unique. Like
different
the flowers
shadows
at the front. Yeah, the shadows you're not going to get, and the different angles of shadows that are, it's people who study light will look at those and go, because I'm one of those, I see something and I'm trying to figure out where's that light coming from, what direction is that light coming from, and when I see something that's been light painted like that, and it's coming from multiple directions, like, oh, how cool, you can't fake that in Photoshop too easily, although I know a guy who does, but.
Yeah, he probably lights something from 3 different angles and composites them or something, right?
Oh, he more like 40. He'll take 40 different photos and put them together, and they look like just magnificent paintings. I mean, they're just.
Until he did all that work, he might as well just done the light painting, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yes.
I mean, it's only a 30-second exposure, right?
Right.
Loren, what about non-LED flashlights? What kind of effect do you get if you use a non-LED flashlight?
The same. I mean, I just started using LEDs however many years ago, not very many years ago. Before that, I was using just the regular old tungsten lights or whatever. So it doesn't really matter what kind of light it is. And it only matters the temperature if there's other temperatures that you're mixing with or matching. So if you use a very yellow light, especially for the indoor stuff, it just doesn't matter, if you're only having one light source.
Okay.
Now, if you mix in with other lights, then you run into some challenges. But
in the beginning, when you showed your little small flashlights with the aluminum foil, how close again did you say you were getting to the objects with those? Maybe
4 to 6 inches. It just depends on how bright I want the scene to be and how bright that little flashlight is.
So it doesn't matter that you're in front of the camera, it's as long as you don't point the light back toward the lens, right?
As long as, and as long as I'm not in between where I'm lighting and the camera.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm lighting something and,
So point to the right when you're on the left and point to the left when you're on the right, I guess, huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It was
Anything
very,
else?
very, very
Anybody?
good.
Great.
Can I warn everyone? Light painting is addicting.
The dictator.
And you end up spending your whole life in the dark.
Well, one of our people said she ran outside. She left just a moment ago to go outside and find some things in her backyard to start painting tonight.
I didn't
Awesome.
leave. That was me. I didn't leave. I can look out of my backyard from where I'm
Oh,
sitting.
she's there. There she is.
I'm right here.
Yeah,
And
Ginny paints from her lounge chair.
I'm thinking there
Yeah.
might be a wheelbarrow out there, or
You asked her, well,
Absolutely.
she did like that yellow chair that was in that
I
one
love
shot.
that yellow chair. That was my favorite.
So you still have some light in the sky, so you've got plenty of.
I got the
You got
blue
some-
hour
you got some
going
blue-
on right here.
You got some blue.
I got the blue hour. I got my backyard, and the mosquitoes aren't biting me. So
Hey, there you go.
Kidding me.
I got to tell you one little quick. A couple of weeks ago, I was out shooting, and the lightning bugs were out, right? And I've always tried to figure out how to capture a picture of the lightning bugs the way I see them. And I haven't figured it out. If anybody knows how,
Put
let
them
me
to
know.
work. Put them to work.
Yeah, but one of them flew right in front of the lens, and I didn't really see it. And it lit up right in front of the lens. Literally, it must have been about that far away. So I had this big green streak going across, and I'm like, what the hell was that? Oh, it was a lightning bug, but just looked like a big ugly green streak. So that didn't
Somebody
work
asked
either.
earlier if anybody shot the comet. Has anybody been able to get a shot of this recent comet?
That's my goal for the rest of the week. I have a workshop up here in Vermont, a night photography workshop with the new moon, and so that's going to be the goal is get a different shot of that comet. One of the problems is
How much longer should it be visible in the tail and everything?
This week.
for another week or so at least.
yeah, this
Yeah,
On
they
August
said this
17th.
week, right? This week it's supposed to be a really good week to be able to find it.
And at
Yeah.
night. It's nighttime now.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm going to be challenged with, and I might get the Star Tracker out for this, is astrophotography I do with a wide angle lens, and the wider the lens, the smaller it's going to be in the sky. So to get put a 200 millimeter lens on it, your stars are going to start streaking on you really fast. So I'm going to have to play. Just going to get out there and try all kinds of things and see what works, because I've never shot a comet before. I don't know how you shoot a comet. I've shot a lot of other things, but we'll figure out. By the end of the weekend, I'll know how to shoot a comet.
So I've been reading about this. The peak night is August 12th. There'll be about 40 some comets an hour, 48 at its peak that night.
You're talking about meteor.
The meteor. Is
Yeah,
that
you're
what-
talking to me.
We're
Oh,
talking
you're
about
the Neowise comet that's out now. Okay. Yeah. I mixed that up, right? Let's see it.
The landed, you're talking about the starship, the asteroids.
Yeah, I'm talking about the shower.
Yeah, those I figured out how to shoot, but
Yeah,
not a comet.
Neowise, I think, is what is out there now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, it'll be
All
fun.
over
That'll be a challenge.
Instagram. Instagram is covered with that particular comet. Lauren,
Yeah.
you mentioned the fireflies. There's a guy, David Corden, who went to Japan to do that. And he has night photography in a forest. And the fireflies are massive, like 1 million.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
entire picture is nothing but these yellow dots everywhere, all among all the trees. And his
Right.
images of that, from that experience a couple months ago, are staggering. David Corden.
Yeah.
Daniel
And-
Corden.
Daniel, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a time lapse or a video, because supposedly they're communicating and doing
Yes.
certain mating things where they light up something and then it attracts the other mate or
Yes.
something.
He has a whole bunch of time-lapse videos of them. It's just really very, very neat to see. And it would be easy to find on the internet.
And what was the last name again?
Kordan, Daniel.
Kordan. Kordan.
Yeah, he's a Russian professional photographer. And he's really
Once
very,
you look at his website, it's going to pop up on your Facebook feed about every third time too.
yeah. Daniel, or Lauren, can you just give a plug for your two meetups? how people might find them?
Actually, I have 9 of them. So, Philadelphia Travel Photographers is probably the closest one to you folks. I have a Washington, D.C. travel photography one and a Baltimore travel photography meetup. And I try to keep them pretty active. I do free things on there, and I do, and I have some paid workshops, although this year that's not good. So I have a 12-passenger Sprinter van that I back in the good old days last year, hauled people around and you go to places like New York or Philly or still hoping to do a Maine Lighthouse's workshop in September. And so.
And then there's the Somerset meetup, right?
And Somerset, New Jersey, right? Somerset Photography meetup. Yep.
They're really good.
But pretty much everything's on my website too. So all the events, although my event planning for the next couple of months is on hold. So actually, I'm opening a new
entertainment venues like movie theaters.
Okay. I'm opening a new photo gallery here in Woodstock, Vermont. So I just signed the lease today. So that's going to keep me busy for the next couple of weeks. And so if you're ever in Vermont, come by Woodstock and look at my gallery right in the middle of downtown Woodstock. So it's a beautiful little town here in Vermont.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Loren, and folks, don't forget August 17, about a month from now, we'll meet again with Peter Hewitt. Anybody else? Okay, Loren, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks.
Happy
Thanks.
shooting.